Hello everybody, I'm back again. I today wish to talk about an article I saw, which was on the Asia Times. It is titled Jinping's Top 5 Foreign Policy Mistakes. I'm talking about it because it mentioned a lot of stuff in which makes little to no sense and is a reflection of actions done by others just put on the mantle of China instead. There's 4 terms I'm going to go over first. Arrogance, the quality of being arrogant. The arrogance of this man is astounding. Similar words as conceit, concept, hubris, self-importance, egoism. Pretentious, attempting to impress by affecting greater importance or merit than actually possessed. Showy, flashy, conspicuous. Adventurism, the willingness to take risks in business and politics and actions or attitudes regarded as reckless, or potentially hazardous. Imperialism, a policy of expanding a foreign power and influence through colonization and use of military force or other means. These key terms will be important because some of them mentioned here, some of them are not, but are instead the actions of what they are trying to possess. I'll now share the screen to show you what I mean. This is the article here. I'll go to it off a little later. And there's something you show as well in a minute as well, which is kind of to prove a point. Let's start with this fight. Let's start off by showing this picture of all things. It's trying to set the agenda of the thing. Just by sending a picture like this, you are trying to make it out that of what you want, that your balance won't be there. And it goes on to show. Because it's about saying Xi Jinping's aggressive foreign policy is stimulating increased international opposition to the Communist Party's agenda. By saying the Communist Party's agenda is a weird scapegoat to try and give a really weird rationale behind it. To give a really weird rationale behind what China wants, what the Communist Party wants. By trying to put agenda in there as a link in for conspicuous or untrustworthiness. Undoing years of effort by people of the Republic of China officially to acquire regional governments that are stronger people's non-domineering, which is actually true though to the most part. It's a lot more because once again, I hate to use this example, but what country has China ever invaded? Was that? None? Funny that. At least none in the last long while, ever since the reforms. Meanwhile, the US and other people have been reliant on war for their goddamn industries and power, prestige. But that makes a clear distinction. And let's go over the quote-unquote self-defeating decisions. Let's go. It starts off by saying this in what I highlighted. To demonstrate fighting spirit and to dare show their swords accordingly, Chinese diplomats have aimed drawing insults and threats at various countries. But hang on a minute though. That is a really weird judgmental action right there. Because at the end of the day, most likely, you'll see later, they consider Taiwan a country. And they will use that as a prime example of threats and insults. And when I see various countries as well, he also mentioned Australia, which is kind of funny because Australia is a separate case, which I'll go into later. And here's the thing about this one, like this thing here, is that everything they're accusing China of in this so far, the US and NATO has done on other people. The US is very much not happy with people wanting their own thing and wanting to have their own path. Anyone that wants sovereignty or wants to support China, in comes the US like the good old Cold War, eh? Coming in there wanting to destabilize their governments or powers to weaken them or overthrow them. Funny that. Yet has China done that to anyone? No. Have they just tried to work with whatever party in the area? Yes. But has the US and others in NATO respected that will? No. Because if anything, NATO is the biggest curse of Western democracy and the biggest strong arm of the US empire over, quote unquote, Western democracies. And to continue what I'm saying here, according to Indian sources, and it's also talking about this skirmish, right? I won't go into this, as others can talk about it a lot more better than me, so I won't even touch it. And this is where this is another point which is absolutely useless to mention, because this is where it's misleading information. Because it's saying that the most aggressive, right? Yet they fail to understand what China has said before about the South China Sea, where they essentially said something in the lines of, if you don't impede in territorial gains or cause issues, we won't militarize, we will just leave them be. Yet the expansionism and adventurism has increased and hasn't really stopped, really, coming from NATO. And that's why, for example, the US and Russia has done their own little thing, doing a little joint naval thing next to Japan. This would be a point, I think. And this is another thing they will want to lie about. Impose its will upon weaker neighbors rather than seeking a mutual sectoral compromise. Yet, who does that remind you of when you hear that? Does it remind you of, oh, the United States imposing their own will on other people by coups and by funding terrorist groups? Or does it sound like, oh, Saudi Arabia also, when they literally fund terrorist groups in the Middle East to prop up their own vision for Islam? Yes. Anyway, continuing. Sorry, it's got a text message. Announce any more new bases in convinced international observer the PRC was taking an aggressive turn. What? You mean the one military base where it's a part of joint control? How funny is that? And yet apparently one or two military bases that is for peacekeeping purposes, as for example, China is pretty significant in the peacekeeping efforts in the UN, for example. So that's not weird. And then if you look at that and think that's aggression, and then ignore the fact that the US has like hundreds of bases all over the place, that says to me, you're lying through your fucking teeth. And now we come to number 4. Rather than a blazing creative solution to a man being thought, has simply doubled down on his predecessors' failed policies. But the failed policies, at the same time, here's the thing. Is it really a failed policy to want the best will of all people? China has the power to take back Taiwan by force. But in a choice they made, they want to have it peaceful, preferably, and have the fourth option, the last option, if all else fails. The issue with the Taiwan thing is that you have, as you mentioned later on, the Democratic Progressive Party and the DPP. In this regard, is one of the most toxic influences in modern Republic of China history, because it is actively trying to destroy what is Chinese. And I'll give you a good example of what I'm on about, because Captain Cool showed a good video. I'm just going to find it quickly. Yes, please. Just give me 2 seconds, and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Ultimately, what self-respecting Republic of China president would do this to soldiers? Ask yourself, why would they ever do this in any respecting manner? That is enough of that thing there to show. And it said, because after, Xi has increased military presence on Taiwan. This is deeply resented on terms of China and bosses for pro-DPP people. Here's the thing, though. It's more complex than that, because the DPP uses emotions to manipulate elections, and like many other quote-unquote liberal democracies, they use fear. They use your emotions against you, and they engage in corruption like anyone else. And then act so virtuous and defender. Because in short, what they do is they try and pull up China as the big enemy so they can justify their own terror over the island, their own dictatorship over the island. So it's not really just what they want to say here, that's reality. Reality would be a lot more damning than anything else. And point 5. This is something I will not necessarily go into yet, but I'll go into later in another video. And then we get to this, and then we get to the biggest and funniest part of it all. This part here. Xi, this part here, that is incorrect. They don't rule on arrogance. They rule with a pride needed for national rejuvenation. Because in many regards, a lot of the actions of NATO in the first world would be this. Because you can say, for example, about a lot of any US presidents. Let's say this example. Trump rules during a period of American hubris by when he was elected, when Trump assumed leadership. Or let's say Biden rules during a period of American hubris by when he was elected, when Biden assumed leadership. That would assume that would fit a lot more better than anything else they're trying to say about Xi here. Because they show that. Because the difference here is China isn't trying to promote Chinese supremacy, but America's promoting American supremacy as a base foreign policy. And there's this one here. Third concluding factor is hyper-authoritarianism. This is where I think this is where the whole anti-authoritarian bad crowd is very much weird, because to a certain degree you need enough central power to do what you need to do. You can't just be all anti-authoritarian and be like, oh, democratic processes, and then when the crisis comes, as we saw with COVID, you fall apart to shit and take forever and have too many people die. And because when that time comes, and you need a certain degree of firmness and democracy. Being anti-authoritarian isn't the answer. It's just a retarded outcome of modern liberalism. And this is an example, another example of not understanding this. Indulged nationalist and domestic public opinion. Xi himself hasn't really done that. Xi himself, all he promoted outwardly was instead something of a different vision, that of a respect for China, respect for self as if you're Chinese, and also respect for the world, and vice versa, and for others to respect them. It's not about supremacy in this indulged nationalistic quote-unquote public opinion, as this is really xenophobic of a mindset, because it's trying to make out that the China dream and the national rejuvenation ideal, which comes under socialist modernization, is evil, when it's absolutely necessary for the advancement of China. Enough of this now. The reason why I'm now going to look at this other stuff you've written, because this is really quite funny. The other stuff he writes about, and the other titles he uses. Of course, with this one you saw. Wuhan Lab Theory. Japan on appointed horns of a China dilemma. Biden inherits qualified North Korea policy failure. Attacking Australia, Beijing trusts win by losing. Biden China policy will upgrade Trump's. That is actually the one true thing they said here. China is not a threat to US liberty or democracy. That is true as well to this part. And to some degree, this one's actually exactly well, because as I said before, The policy of the CPC isn't necessarily to attack openly, because they have time on their side. The US doesn't have time on their side, and they probably want an aggression. And then you got these two. China's peace and reconciliation efforts fall flat. And China's domestic policies hamstring its diplomacy. This is probably where the whole weirdness, and this is what I mean by this person. He has a really weird mindset towards it, not understanding that at the end of the day, not saying that at the end of everything, it is the US that's causing most of the cardinal sins about breach of territory or conduct. It is not the US, it is not China. China is developing itself as it should. Because as much as people may like to decry a lot of things, the development of China is absolutely essential. And if you want to talk about imperialism, just look at this picture right here. Try and get the UK, Australia, and US in an alliance to crush China's development as merely one alliance alongside other alliances. That should tell you more than anything than the article ever said.